Hey everybody, welcome to the video. We finally made it. Daytona 500 weekend is here with a Millie Maker, $1 million to first for the first time ever over on DraftKings this weekend. So there's a lot to be excited about, and I assume it's going to bring in a lot of new faces. So if that's you, you're brand new to the channel, you haven't been here before. My name is Pennell. I break down NASCAR DFS each and every single weekend with a preview and breakdown video like you're watching right now. I also do a live stream, and I'm also a part of the Awesemo YouTube channel, which you can find me over there on race days as well. And if you do end up enjoying the free content that I put out over on YouTube, all I ask is if you can just leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already, ring the bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content, and leave a comment if you so happen to want to. I know it's something small, but it really does help me out in the YouTube algorithm, and I really do appreciate it. And if we can get close to 400 likes in this video, that'd be awesome. We were close to it last Daytona 500, and I think we can get it this season. And if you do want to take that one step further and join the #1 NASCAR DFS community out there, we typically have around a few hundred people. Discord's jumping 24/7. I have projections for DraftKings, FanDuel, Prize Picks, that's including lap sled, fast laps, place differential. Have my entire NASCAR model, which basically has everything you want over there. I have my own optimizer, which is capable of building groups. Ownership projections, which I personally think are the best in the industry. You can set 150 max builds, anything you want, fully functional, upload it right to DraftKings. If you want to check it out, link can be found down below in the description right beside the orange bubble. There's many more, but I don't want to waste your guys' time and talk about everything. You can look for yourself, and if it's something for you, I think you will end up enjoying it. And lastly, I'd like to mention the sponsor of the show, Prize Picks. If you don't know what it is by now, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests or salary cap restrictions or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And like I said, I am offering Prize Picks projections on the spreadsheet. Also go over some of my favorite plays on Prize Picks in the article as well. But if you are a new signee over there, you can either go to prizepicks.com, use the link down below, use promo code CPEN, that's promo code CPEN, to get an instant deposit match bonus up to $100. So it's free money. Why not use it to your advantage? But I think that'll be pretty much it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's get into the preview of this weekend's race. And as always, I have to mention a few things before we get started. So first off, #1, the live streams do return this week for the Daytona 500. I'll be going live on my own channel, the one you're watching on right now, at around 11 a.m. Eastern on Sunday. It's just a fun place to come in, hang out before the race, ask me all the questions you want, and I will do my very best to answer each and every single one of them. And also be live before lock on the Awesemo YouTube channel an hour before lock, right until the race starts on Sunday with Phil, Jason, and myself. If you do want to head over there after we have our own live stream party over here. And #2, the DraftKings contest do return as well. I made it to 200 people this weekend, so I'm gonna need some help. If you haven't played before, it's just the DraftKings contest that I host each and every single week, more of like a listener league. It's $3 to enter, and the winners do get a good chunk of change. First place is getting well over $100 some. You get a free shout out on the channel, and it's just fun to compete against you guys and see what kind of lineups you are building. So if you want to join, all you gotta do is comment your DK username down below. I'll be more than happy to send you an invite. I can try to put a link in the comments, but sometimes YouTube does not like me doing that. I'll try to put some links on Twitter if you want to follow me over there at ChrisPennell16 to make it easier on yourself. But just to be safe, comment your DK username, and I'll be more than happy to send you an invite. But I think that's it for the housekeeping for the most part. So without further ado, let's get right into the preview of this week's race. And as previously mentioned, this is the Daytona 500 at Daytona International Speedway, the marquee race of the NASCAR season. Basically NASCAR's championship. It's the race everyone cares about the most. There's your outline of the track. It's your prototypical plate race. Daytona and Talladega is where all the drivers are in tight packs going nearly 200 miles per hour, inches away from each other, and they're all going to be bunched up. And one wrong move, one slight error, one dumb mistake, which happens literally each and every single time, will cause the big one, which is what we call it. And it is a common theme at Daytona. It basically always happens. It's just a matter of when, not if. It could be early. We've seen it early. We saw that last season. It could be in the middle. It could be at the end. We could have multiple big ones, but there is going to be some wrecks. That is a guarantee. I know what you're probably thinking. That sounds terrifying playing fantasy when all your guys are going to wreck. And yes, in theory, that is a little bit scary, but there's a way we can construct lineups to try to mitigate our risk. Because you see, at Daytona, if you look at the previous optimal lineups, typically there's a common thing amongst all of them. There's a lot of salary left on the table. All the drivers are pretty much starting in the back, and the reason being is all the guys up front, they're jockeying for position. They end up typically causing the big one. Those are all the good drivers for the most part. I'm not saying every good driver is going to wreck out, but these are the guys being aggressive, trying to put themselves in good position to win the race, and they end up taking out half the field up front. And when that happens, the guys that are qualified first, second, third, like Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman, who I personally think are the worst plays on the slate, they end up scoring, like if Kyle Larson happens to be the first guy that wrecks out, we're talking nearly like negative 40 points. I do have a heat map which will show how many points a driver can score compared where they end up finishing, but that's the thing on Patreon. But they can end up scoring like negative 30, negative 40 points nearly. A guy that starts in the very back, like a guy starting 39th, the worst he can do is nearly 0 points. So even then, if he was the first guy that wrecks out, and a guy like Kyle Larson or anyone up near the front can still get in the negative 20s and negative 30s. So they offer you such a high floor, and they offer you an insanely high ceiling, because it's not like a normal track where those guys in the back are typically back marker cars and they really can't move themselves up. Almost every car is close to equal here at Daytona. Obviously, some cars can be faster, and some guys will end up losing the draft, some of the back marker cars, but for the most part, this is a pretty even playing field compared to other tracks. So equipment's not going to be a huge deal here. And one other thing of note is that Dominator points are basically just useless here. Now, at most tracks, like a 1.5 mile, or when we go to Fontana very soon, Dominator points are going to be important. Those are guys getting lap sled points and fast laps. But the thing is, at Daytona, fast laps are completely random. Since everyone's drafting off each other, you cannot project fast laps. So I completely remove them from my projections at a super speedway like Daytona or Talladega. So that's not something I'm even considering, because it could be anybody in the field any single lap. So it's not like the guy up front is just going to rack up fast laps. Notice a lap sled. These guys get interchanged all the time. They're going to be side by side. Yes, the guy up front, if he's getting lap sled points, that's fine. But if Kyle Larson leads 30 laps and ends up finishing 17th, who cares? It's going to be absolutely useless. We do not care about Dominator points whatsoever. We do have 140 total available to us, and there's 200 laps, but it's just not something of importance. So do not worry about that whatsoever. We'll worry about that next week, but this is not the week to care about Dominator points. And also, do not be afraid to leave money on the table. I was playing around with my cash game build, and I'm looking at over $5,000 on the table in my cash. Do not try to zero out your lineup. If you are zeroing out your lineup, you are probably making a terrible lineup, because the way the order is set, and looking at my projections and some of the dummy builds so far, you are not going to want to use your salary, because you are probably going to end up losing money going that route. And there's some lineups where you can get close to it, but if you're going out of your way to do it, it's probably not the greatest lineup unless you're really jamming in guys like Denny Hamlin, Legato, Byron, and maybe another guy that's expensive. But for the most part, leaving money on the table is a great way to go, because people don't like doing it. It's a good way to get different. And I'll be honest, there's been some years where there's nearly like $20-some thousand on the table in the optimal lineup. So do not be afraid to do that, even though it's scary. But this is not NBA, this is not baseball, this is not football. The salary cap basically means nothing this week. But I think that'll be pretty much it for the preview for the most part. Like I said, mainly stick to guys starting in the back. That does not mean you can't creep towards the front and start getting those guys in the teens and maybe close to 10th. But if we're talking inside the top 10, extremely risky plays, I will play a little bit of those guys in 150 max settings. But for the most part, we're talking very small sprinkles. And most of my exposure will be like a nice scale of, I guess it's opposite on your screen, where it's just going to keep going up as the farther back we get. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the preview. So let's get right into the driver by driver breakdown portion of this week's video. And as always, you will start with the top guy here, and as Denny Hamlin, $10,500, and he just so happens to be probably the best play on the slate. He's definitely going to be the highest owned driver. I'm currently projecting him to probably be in the mid 40s, maybe close to 50% ownership in the big contest on Sunday, but it's really hard not to like him. He did spin out in the pits on the duels, but starting in 30th, it's really hard to pass up. One of the best, if not the best, super speedway driver the past few seasons. He has been absolutely exceptional at Daytona, a multi-time winner, average finish of 8.3 here the past few races, one of the best running positions, 2 wins, 4 top 5s, 5 top 15s, the most laps led per race, and like I said, fast laps are basically useless. And if you're looking at the past 12 races at super speedways, the best average finish, 3 wins, 7 top 5s. The guy has been an absolute machine. Starting in 30th, he is going to be very chalky, which I think presents us a really interesting situation, because it's a super speedway. Everybody and anybody has an equal chance of wrecking. So Denny Hamlin, just because he's starting in the back, does not mean he's an auto lock to be in the optimal lineup. Now, if he happens to finish this race clean, I'd be very surprised if Hamlin is not in the optimal, but he could very easily get caught up in a wreck, especially if he has to work his way from the back to the front. So I think you have to take a stance here. Either need to be way underweight on Denny Hamlin and try to get some insane leverage, because if he happens to wreck out, you will be looking really good in tournaments. Or you need to be really in on Denny Hamlin, and because if he's going to be so high owned, you got to get some leverage somehow. And if you're not going underweight, instead of being even to the field, which you can do if you just kind of want to take a safe approach. But if you go way overweight, that's another way you can do it as well. But I do like Denny Hamlin quite a bit just from a projection standpoint. He currently is my highest projected driver and the highest owned driver as well, in addition to that. And Chase Elliott, $10,400. He is starting 11th place. I think he's a fine turn play. He's not starting as far up as his teammate Kyle Larson, who I just think is an awful play. But starting at 11th, it does give you a little bit of upside. I'm not super excited about playing any Chase Elliott. I am probably not going to go above like 10 to 15% here. But he is a very good Super Speedway driver. Just have 2 top 5s here the past few races. Consistently inside the top 20. Looking at his most recent finishes, 18th, 8th, 24th. Then had a nice little run there where he finished 2nd, 5th, and 2nd. But I think Chase is a decent tournament play. But again, a guy starting that far up close, you got to be very careful. And he's definitely one of those guys that could end up getting caught in a wreck. I swear the Hendrick drivers just having like a magnet to get caught in carnage at the Super Speedways. I'm not sure what it is, but for the most part, Chase has been pretty good about getting some decent finishes. Kyle Larson, $10,200. He is starting on the pole, and he is an auto fade for me. We have seen in the past where a driver at a Super Speedway like Daytona or Talladega has started on the pole, he's won the race, and he's still not in the optimal lineup just because the dominant points are not going to be there. Even if Kyle Larson leads some laps in this race, I still don't think he'll be in the optimal lineup, assuming there's some crashes and a lot of these drivers end up picking good place differential. Like William Byron, Kevin Harvick, much rather play over Kyle Larson. I'd much rather play Joey Logano. There's just so much downside and so little upside for Larson here. I think he's going to get close to 20% ownership just because a lot of casuals are going to be playing this week, and they know Larson's a big name in the sport, starting in the front, which people are going to think, hey, he'll stay out of the mess the entire time. That's not going to happen. He will get shuffled at some point. I will probably play 0% Kyle Larson in 150 lineups this weekend. If you don't believe me, you can look at the numbers. Playing the pole sitter at Daytona is not the way to win money. It never has been, and it never will. Ryan Blaney, $10,000 starting in 7th. Ryan Blaney is one of the best Super Speedway drivers in all these series. And one thing I forgot to mention about Larson, he's not that great at Super Speedways anyway. Like looking at his numbers, his average finish of 13.6 at Daytona, but 0 top 5s, just have 3 top 10s, but not really that many laps left. Like I said, it's not really important. Just have worse luck at Talladega, but Daytona hasn't really been the best for Kyle Larson in his career. He's just really not that great of a Super Speedway driver. But anyway, Ryan Blaney, part of Team Penske that typically runs the show at these types of tracks. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't get up front, get a good chunk of laps in this race. His only problem is getting caught up in a wreck or not. If he stays clean, I think there's a very strong chance Ryan Blaney is a top 5 driver at the end of the day and very well could win this race. He's actually the most recent winner at Daytona, and he was very close to winning a Daytona 500 in the past as well. So Ryan Blaney starting in 7th, kind of a similar play through Chase Elliott, just a little bit more downside because he is starting 4 spots further up. But if you are using a driver near the front, I would say as of right now, Ryan Blaney is probably my favorite one. And I swear I'm not being biased, but I do have the Blaney shirt on once again. If you guys are brand new, I'm a big fan of Ryan Blaney, so are a lot of people that watch my channel and my Discord chat. But he's very good at Daytona, and he might be a guy I try to take some chances on, hoping for a win. But if he doesn't win, it's probably a very small chance he will be in the optimal lineup. Moving down to the 9K range, we have a really good Super Speedway driver here in Joey Logano at $9,800. Starting in 20th, he did say before the dual race that he will race that as a Daytona 500, and he wasn't kidding. He ended up wrecking his car, and a lot of these guys are short on parts. Not that we have to worry about that for the 500 because these guys are not going to care about preserving their cars or anything. They're going to go all out, and if they wreck, so be it. I think most teams here, pretty much everybody, should come in with the expectation that they're going to lose their car this weekend in some carnage. And Joey Logano is on his backup car, but not a concern for me or anything. He is one of the absolute best drivers here. Similar to his teammate, Ryan Blaney, I would be very shocked if they don't team up at some point, get to the front, and probably work their magic as they always do. It's just a matter of surviving the wrecks or not for Joey Logano. He seems to always be in a great position, but he is one of those drivers that typically causes these wrecks. He'll throw an aggressive block like he did yesterday on Chris Buescher, or make a dumb move. As good as he is, it can work against him in that kind of matter. But I like Logano starting in 20th. I think he's a good tournament play. He's kind of right in the thick of it, starting in 20th place. But, I mean, like I said, he's going to the backup car. But it's kind of a weird spot because 20th, you don't get a ton of place differential upside, and you still have a pretty low floor if you happen to be one of the first guys that wreck out. But there is still some PD upside there, and if he finishes in the top 5, decent chance he could end up making the optimal lineup. So I think Logano is definitely someone to be on our radars here. And if we're looking at his numbers at Daytona recently, very good running position. Average running position of 9th, which is currently the best of all drivers. The average finish near 20th, but I think that pretty much just goes to show you he typically runs better than anybody, but he will get caught up in some wrecks. But I do like Logano quite a bit here. Looking at his recent finishes at super speedways, finished 3rd at Talladega, 23rd in Daytona, 39th again Rex, but Joey Logano is definitely a guy that should be on our radars, as he is a very, very good super speedway driver and has actually the best running position the past 12 races at both Daytona and Talladega, and the best drive rating. So I'm always a big fan of the Penske cars when we head to a track like this. Kyle Busch, $9,600. He is starting in 10th. Typically a guy I stay away from Daytona because he typically qualifies pretty well and he just doesn't really finish these races. He has a really good running position and he has a really good driver rating, but 1 top 5 and only 3 top 15s to show for it at Daytona recently. Average finish of 22nd, starting in 10th. I would rather play Elliott. I would rather play Blaney. I will have some Kyle Busch, but he's just in that spot where there's really not much for him to offer us. Because if he finishes like 6th place, yeah, it's a good finish for Kyle Busch, but that's not going to do any damage on DraftKings. So he's going to have to pretty much nearly win the race and lead a good chunk of laps for him to be optimal. Then William Byron, Kevin Harvick, these two are pretty much the same exact plays. Both these guys typically run pretty well, but they can end up getting caught up in some wrecks sometimes. So William Byron is a winner at Daytona recently. It was a couple of seasons ago, but the Hendrick cars typically run pretty well, but they end up getting caught up in the mess quite a bit. But when William Byron is not wrecking, he actually has some pretty decent finishes. So the past 2 races for him at super speedways, 36th and 37th, but he did finish 2nd at Talladega, and another issue, but then 4th at Daytona again, and then 1st Daytona in the 2nd race there in 2020, which did get him into the playoffs, if you guys remember that exciting race. So I think William Byron, Kevin Harvick, both very solid plays, starting 23rd and 22nd, should have similar ownership. So offer you a little bit of PD upside. I don't like them as much as Joey Logano, but they're kind of right there with them as being pretty solid plays. And Kurt Busch, $9,000 now in the 45 car under Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin, starting 17th. It makes him a good tournament play. I would not play him in cash games, starting too close to the front for me, but he's one of those guys that could sneak inside the top 10, top 5, which could make him a decent play. But again, starting 17th, there's a lot of risk here, and he's one of those guys that has been getting a little bit unlucky recently. But I think Kurt's fine in tournaments. Dropping down to the 8K range, Martin Truex Jr. is typically a fade for me every single super speedway race. He has an average finish of 24.7. The running position isn't very good for him either. Has 1 top 5, 1 top 10. It's just Martin Truex Jr. is not a very good super speedway driver, so I don't envision myself playing much whatsoever. Maybe 10% there, but I don't see myself having too much Truex. Same can be said for Bowman, although I'll take that even further and say I'll probably play 0% Alex Bowman here. He's just one of those guys that's like a magnet for wrecks. And even if he just kind of holds his position the entire race, if he finishes 2nd, he's not going to be in the optimal lineup. So I have basically 0 interest in Alex Bowman. I can't see him winning this. Even if he does, it's still probably likely he won't end up being in the optimal unless he led a good chunk of this race, which is not something you can really rely on. But speaking of a good play here, we have Austin Dillon at $8,400, starting all the way back in 36. He's actually a pretty good plate racer, is a former Daytona 500 champion, and he's starting 36. Like, the upside here is insane. The floor is very low. If he finishes like 15th, we're talking about a lot of points. So Austin Dillon, he is going to be a cash game staple for me. He will be extremely high owned, but I think it's for a good reason. He is a very hard fade for me. Again, anybody can get caught up in a wreck here. So if he happens to wreck out early, you will have some insane leverage. But projection-wise, he looks fantastic this weekend. Bubba Wallace, $8,300, starting in 16th. I actually think he's a pretty good tournament play because Bubba Wallace, while he's not the greatest driver out there, and he definitely does disappoint, but he's actually not that bad at super speedway tracks. He does have 1st and 2nd place finishes the past 2 races at them. Just have Denny Hamlin to potentially work with, any of the Toyotas, Kurt Busch's teammate, anybody part of the Michael Jordan clan, really. But starting in 16th, more of a tournament play, but I will definitely have some shares as I don't think he's going to be very high owned, especially at that price point. Again, pricing doesn't matter, but to the casual fan, they're going to factor in the prices more so than experienced players where they know it doesn't really matter too much. But I think Bubba Wallace is a decent tournament target. Brad Keselowski, $8,200, starting in 3rd. Loved him in the duels. Was my highest projected driver in actually duel 1. Ended up winning the race. Got a little bit lucky that there was some issues with Austin Cindric and Ryan Blaney at the end, jockeying for position. Brad Keselowski, didn't seem to matter that he was no longer with Penske. He was just fine with Roush Fenway Keselowski. They actually swept the duels as Chris Buescher won duel 2. It was a sweep for Roush Fenway Keselowski, and I think they're going to be just fine. In the past, these guys, Roush Fenway's been fine super speedways. The thing is, though, starting in 3rd place, I just can't really play Brad. He's going to have to win the race, and even then, I'm not sure that's going to be enough to be optimal. I will have maybe 5% Keselowski in case he wins, but even then, I don't see myself having much whatsoever at all. And then moving on to Eric Almirola, $8,000 starting in 38th place. He is a very similar play to Austin Dillon. Basically the same play there, just starts a few spots further back. He is going to be insanely chalky. He's a cash game staple. There's really nothing here I can say that you guys probably don't already know by now, but starting in the back, amazing play, high floor, insanely high ceiling. Actually a good plate racer, is much better at Talladega than he is Daytona. They do play a little bit different. Talladega is a lot more wide. Daytona is pretty narrow. But starting in 38th, he doesn't need to do much to be a good play. So play your Cumberland cash games. You want to be underweight in tournaments? I get it. I mean, Stenhouse is right there, starting in 18th, who does have race winning potential. But Eric Almirola, I'd say, has similar potential to Stenhouse. He's just going to be much lower around Stenhouse, that is. So just kind of like an ownership question there. And you can find all my ownership projections over on my optimizer if you guys have any questions on where to go leverage-wise for that. But obviously a big fan of Almirola here. Will be one of my highest owned drivers. Ricky Stenhouse, $700 starting in 18th. I know everyone, he's got the nickname Ricky Stenhouse. I mean, we get the idea with Ricky Stenhouse. I mean, he wrecked in the Clash, or spun in the Clash, whatever it was, and he just has a history of doing that. But at the Super Speedways, he's actually pretty good, and actually one of the best drivers. He can actually work his way to the front. He does have aggressiveness, which can make him a risky play because they could easily crash out. It could be wreckers or checkers, but I think Stenhouse is a pretty solid tournament play. Would not mind dipping my toes a little bit there, starting at 18th place. Kind of in a rough spot, but it does make him a good tournament play. Chris Buescher, $7,800 starting in 4th. I am typically one that always plays Chris Buescher at Daytona and Talladega. I played him a lot last night in Duel 2. Ended up winning. Was not expecting a win. I was just hoping for a top 10, but definitely exceeded expectations. But hard for me to play any Chris Buescher starting in 4th place. Like, again, anyone in the top 5 has to win to even have a shot at being optimal. And just the chances of Chris Buescher winning are pretty low, so I don't envision myself playing like more than maybe 1 or 2% of Chris Buescher here. Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, very similar plays here. Tyler Reddick, I feel like, is one of those guys that could definitely cause the big one. He did the 1 year when he was a rookie, put that one wild block on Kyle Busch with, I think he should have waited a little bit longer to put a wild block like that, but he ended up causing the first wreck of the race, and Tyler Reddick is one of those guys that I think, could be definitely in the thick of it, so you gotta be careful with him. Starting in 15th, tough spot to be in anyway, especially as far as DraftKings scorings go to be optimal. But, if he cracks the top 5, he'll be a decent DFS play. But I'm not going to have a ton of Tyler Reddick. Probably max out around 10-ish%, maybe a little bit more. Christopher Bell in a very similar scenario there. So nothing I can really say that's too much different about them. But both have similar finishing position upside. Just a matter of if they wreck or not. But they're just starting so far up front where it does make them quite risky plays. And Austin Cindric, $7,500. Like I said, always a big fan of Team Penske. The problem is he is starting really far up front. Now, he's not too far away from Ryan Blaney, who I did say I like. But Austin Cindric is a rookie this season. Now, he does have some cup races under his belt, and he's not just a normal rookie. The guy is very, very good. He's been in the Penske stable for quite some time, so I don't think Austin Cindric's going to suck or anything. He was obviously very good in the duels, and it wouldn't surprise me if he gets a top 10 finish. But again, that starting position is very hard to get to. Justin Haley, $7,400 starting in 25th. Pretty darn good. The Super Speedways did have success in the Xfinity Series with Colleague Racing, and now that he's in the big leagues here in the 31 car, starting 25th, only $7,400. I think he'll be a very, very solid play here. Michael McDowell, last year's Daytona 500 champion, more so due to a wreck at the very end, but he was in the right place at the right time, and that's what Daytona is. I mean, yeah, there's a skill involved, but a lot of it is luck-based, and Michael McDowell deserved it, though. I mean, he's a good Super Speedway driver. He's one of those guys that typically is close to the front for the majority of the race. Problem is, starting in 6th, similar to Chris Buescher, where I typically like him at these tracks, just starting a little bit too far up front for me to really have much interest whatsoever. Daniel Hemrick, $7,000, starting all the way back in 33rd place. He's in the 16 car, which is kind of a revolving door of 3 drivers so far this season, but Hemrick is getting the start. This weekend, he's with Colleague, who has shown that they can have success at Super Speedways. I think if him and Justin Haley can work together and avoid the wrecks, he will be a very solid play starting all the way back in 33rd. You can definitely play him in cash games and feel pretty good about it. Chase Briscoe, probably a guy I'm not going to have much interest in, just starting too close to the front. Will I have a sprinkle of him? Yeah, maybe like a sprinkle of a sprinkle, a few percentages of Chase Briscoe. But I'd be shocked if he ended up making the optimal. Ross Chastain, $6,700, starting in 19th. Back in the day, he used to be in absolutely awful equipment, so we just play him because he rides in the back, waits for the wrecks, and gets his top 20 finish, and we're all happy at the end of the day. Now that he's in good equipment, the number 1 car was in the 42 last year with Chip Ganassi, now in the 1 car. Teammates with Daniel Suarez for Trackhouse Racing. Daniel Suarez does not have a good history at Super Speedways, so I'm not sure how much he's going to want to work with Suarez. But starting in 19th, he's kind of in that dead zone where you don't want to play these guys, but you don't want to completely fade them, which does make them pretty good tournament plays. If you're just overweight on the guys in the middle of the field, I mean, you got some pretty good leverage on the field typically at super speedways. Cole Custer, $6,500 starting in 31st. Pretty similar play to guys like Hemrick. Now, I wouldn't say it's a similar play to Greg Biffle. Cole Custer's got a better car than Greg Biffle does with New York Racing, as he's in a Stewart-Haas car. But Cole Custer is definitely in play, starting in 31st. Projections don't mind him. He's cheap. Again, not like it matters, but I mean, he's just a fine, cheap PD play on this slate. I feel like he could be a little bit more expensive. If this pricing was released after qualifying, Cole Custer is probably getting closer to like $8,000 than $6,500. Greg Biffle, $6,300 starting in 28th. His car was not terrible in the second dual race, but I don't think it's amazing. But if he just avoids the wrecks, I think he's a somewhat okay play. But starting in 28th, it's not like he's in the very back in the 30s where he's just an auto PD play. So Biffle, I don't have a ton of interest, but I'm not going to completely fade him. Harrison Burton, $6,200 in the 21 car for Wood Brothers, no longer MDB. I think it's going to be a downgrade this season, but Burton, basically a Penske car, the fourth Penske car. I mean, he could team up with them and run around the front the majority of the day, but starting in 8th place, it's kind of a risky spot for me, but I think he's a tournament play, because if he holds a top 5, it's not going to kill you, but I mean, I would much rather play pretty much everybody else down here than Harrison Burton. It's just there's very little upside if you play him. Eric Jones, $6,000, starting in 13th, a very good plate racer, but again, starting close to the front where I just don't want to play him. I mean, if he gets a top 5, and I'm not saying Eric Jones can't win the race, but he's no longer with Joe Gibbs. It'd be nice, but 43 car is not terrible at Super Series. We've seen Bub Wallace have success in that in the past, and Eric Jones, obviously a good plate racer, so I think he's fine in tournaments. I mean, all these guys are going to have more ownership than guys like Harrison Burton and Eric Jones. If you're looking for the leverage plays, those are your guys, but the math says they're probably not the smartest plays. Dropping down to the 5K range, Daniel Suarez, $5,800 starting in 21st. He had a pretty awful history at Daytona recently. We're talking 5.1 DraftKings points per race and an average finish of 31st. And if we expand this to his actual finishes, the past 6 plate races, 23rd, 19th, 23rd, 36th, 34th, and 26th. So starting 21st, I mean, he's playable, not in love with it. I mean, he's not like in a huge PD position anyway, so he's going to have some pretty low ownership down here compared to these other guys, as they do offer you some PD upside. Landon Castle, $5,600, starting in 27th. He was a mega chalk last year in this race. Now, the thing is, he's one of those guys that is very good at just running laps, staying alive till the end. Now, it obviously did not happen last year, but I want to take a shot on Landon Castle. Now, I was starting dead last season, so it's definitely different. But starting in 27th, if he can stay clean, get a top 20, he is playable. Now, the floor is not as high as guys like Noah Gragson here, David Reagan, just some of these other guys starting in the very, very back. But I think he is playable. He's not my favorite back marker card, just because starting in 27th, you'd want it to be a little bit further back. But there's some pretty good cars that are starting further back, which should bump these guys up a little bit more than I would like. Corey LaJoie, $5,500, starting in 24th. He's actually kind of like the Daytona GOAT when it comes to DraftKings, because he would just ride around the back and grab a solid finish. And he's got 3 top 10s here the past 6 races, 5 top 20s. Like, the guy's just been an absolute machine. Now, he's not the greatest driver, obviously. He's not in the best equipment, but an average finish of 13.2 and nearly 50 DraftKings points per race. He has a pretty good strategy here. I mean, he's with Spire, so it's not like his equipment's great or anything, but I would not mind playing some Corey LaJoie starting in 24th. I think that will keep some people off of him, but I still think a top 20 is certainly in the works, and that's something he does quite often here. Noah Gragson, $5,300 in the 62 car Beer Motorsports. If you guys remember the 62, that's what Brendan Gaughan was in, who is basically my favorite play every single year, and he typically always smashed. Like, Brendan Gaughan was like in 5 out of the past 6 optimal lineups of super speedways at one point. Unfortunately, he is no longer with us. I mean, he's still alive. He's just not racing anymore. But Noah Gragson here, starting at 39th. I mean, I think he's a good play. I mean, we know the 62 car can compete. He's not going to lose the draft, hopefully, $5,300. Again, pricing doesn't matter, but I mean, he's just a fine cash play. He really can't hurt you at all. Like, I mean, I would just have a hard time not playing him in cash games. Tournaments, I mean, sure, you can get away from it, but it's just really hard not to play Gragson here, as he virtually has 0 downside besides losing 1 spot to the guy's name that's really hard to pronounce. Ty Dillon, $5,200, starting in 26. Similar to Corey LaJoie. I mean, they just have a strategy down here that works, where they just are pretty good at finishing races and getting some solid finishes. 41 DraftKings points per race, average finish of 15.5, 2 top 10s. And looking at his recent finishes, I mean, he hasn't been in the Cup Series as he was out last year, but he did finish 3rd at his most recent Super Speedway race. And like I said, has had a pretty good history at Daytona, so I think Ty Dillon certainly in play, kind of a similar play to Corey LaJoie. David Reagan, $5,100, starting at 34th. I mean, equipment's obviously not great. Rick Ware car, 15, always obviously in danger of losing the draft or just the engine blowing up. But if there's some wrecks and he's still alive out there, he can gain some spots and it'll be a good PD play. Kaz Grala, $4,900, almost lost his spot that JJ Yeley got at the very end of the dual race, number 1. I mean, I think everyone was shocked to hear that Kaz Grala ended up advancing after he fell a lap down. He lost the draft and had a speeding penalty on pit road, but got lapped at the very end, which propelled him to be able to get into the Daytona 500, which is I'm happy for because that car is very, very sharp looking. The Pit Viper glasses car backed by Floyd Mayweather, starting 35th. He's a fine pump play. We'll leave it at that. Cody Ware, starting at 32nd, $4,800. No different of a play than guys like David Reagan, all those guys in the back, Todd Gilliland. So, I mean, play him if you want. If there's some wrecks, he'll be a decent PD play. I mean, not if. There is going to be some wrecks. It's just a matter of how late in the race do the wrecks happen. It's just hard to trust, those Rick Ware kind of cars. Todd Gilliland, $4,700 for Motorsports. We know they typically run pretty well at super speedway races. Starting at 29th, he's dirt cheap at $4,700. I think you can take some steps at Gilliland down here. Jog Villeneuve, $4,600, starting in 40th. His car would not start at the beginning of the dual race yesterday, so that does give me some concerns if we're already having some car issues in the 27 car. I mean, he's starting dead last, so the worst he can do is just basically nothing. I mean, he can't lose you any points. No other driver can say that. That's just, I feel like the upside for him is pretty low unless we get some wrecks early on. He's definitely probably going to be in danger of losing the draft at some point. I mean, he's playable. I will have some, but I'm not going to go crazy on him just because he's starting dead last. I would rather play BJ McLeod, starting at 37th. BJ McLeod, Live Fast Motorsports, in a 78 car, who actually does have a couple top 20 finishes at Daytona and a top 10 finish as recent as last season, and he's starting 37th. I do prefer him as a pump play rather than some of these other guys down low. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the video. So if you found it helpful, informational, entertaining, or whatever in any way possible, all I ask if you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be here all season long breaking down NASCAR DFS slates like I did in this one. We have 36 races this year, so we're going to be here up until around November. I'll be doing live streams each and every single week. You can catch me on it on Sunday at 11 a.m. And if you want to check out the Patreon, if you enjoyed the free content here, I know for sure you'll definitely like the extra content that I put out over on Patreon. Articles, projections, predicted ownership, simulation scores with leverages, prize picks, FanDuel, whatever it is, you name it, power rankings, which are algorithm based, and basically anything over there. My own personal GP exposure, so I can't be more transparent than possible. Check it out. Link can be found down below. Make sure if you want to join the DraftKings contest, comment your DK username down below. I'll try to put some links somewhere, but just to be safe, please do that and I can send you an invite. We have 200 people to fill, so I greatly appreciate it if you would end up joining it. And it's fun to play all season long. It really is. And I can't forget to shout out the sponsor, Prize Picks, who does make this video possible. And if you haven't signed up yet over there, just use code CPenny and instant deposit match bonus. It's free money. There's no strings attached. It's just if you deposit $50, you get $50 and so on. So check it out. I had the Prize Picks projections up, which cover basically everything. Make sure to follow me over on social media if you want. Chris Pennell 16 on Twitter and CPen16 over on IG. I think that'll be it. I'll get out of here. I'll see you guys on Sunday for the live stream, and I wish you all the best of luck.